We live in a world of, digital short attention span. The sort of the tweet world, weirdly, does, in my view, it's entirely speculative and subjective, does tend to generate a demand for the opposite, for the epic, for the lengthy, for the slow, for the reflective, for the connected. Exactly all the opposite. It'd be inhuman. That's just the way our kind of ganglia are organised, really. So that, I think, feeds into it. The other thing is that there's not much in contemporary history, in the news now, whether it's the election of Obama or the rise of the Tea Party, if we notice that particular phrase, which doesn't somehow extraordinarily plug itself into issues and concerns that come from the past. The real challenge is to sort of connect the contemporary to storytelling about the past in a way which isn't too forced and artificial and exam-like. It's not that hard to do. It requires essentially, a conceptual jump. When you do stories from the past, they shouldn't simply be discrete with an ETE. In other words, just men in wigs. Men in wigs, you kind of, lose your. It's much easier to do, say, Frederick Douglass and his connection to Martin Luther King and onwards. But there's almost no topic that really is of urgent concern to the kids and to our contemporary generations. Obviously, the connection between the economic maelstrom we just passed through and 1929, both in its similarities and dissimilarities, absolutely fundamental to what becomes of us. The question, was Keynes right? Sounds impossibly academic, but can be made amazingly available and accessible and exciting and powerful. Another, someone who spent his life worrying about employment was sitting here in a country where the unemployment figures refused to move from 9.8. So one could go on in foreign policy, wherever one goes. If you want to do it, you can do it. It's sneered at a bit by colleagues who think it's a dilution of their intellectual integrity, to which you want to reply, try it, Buster, And of course, it's what the great historians from Thucydides through Macaulay to Barbara Tuchman and so on, but I mean, she was in her way, have always done. And I have a problem with those who really lock themselves away. I mean, there's this wonderful phrase my professor quoted, paraphrasing Kipling, it's actually Forster's phrase, says, what do they of history know who know only other historians? And the more locked inside, the world of tenure review committees history becomes, the more it kind of disengages itself from history as a kind of civic calling. That was its origin, that's its political and ideological function. It's a kind of honest broker, it speaks truth to power, it delivers difficult and sometimes painful home truths. It's perennial if embraced in that way. I'm doing something which is a complete pushover. It's the history of the Jews. It's particularly, yes, I'm joking, it's the most insanely ambitious thing and also fraught with every conceivable kind of peril. Really, in particular, a history of the triangulation between Jews, Muslims and Christians. We're going to film it in 2012 with and it'll be broadcast for sure in the early spring of 2013. So it's a 5-part series. It's immensely daunting. It's something might well kill me, but it's something I have to do before I die. And I'm making 2 short films, which would be lovely, this year on Shakespeare's history plays, again on the relationship between the politics of Shakespeare's time, what we know about his own angle on that politics, and the history plays, the figure of Falstaff particularly, I felt. It probably is, but we also have the kind of weird counter phenomenon, which is that figures like Glenn Beck, are historically obsessed in kind of weird ways. So that Woodrow Wilson is known to millions of people across America as a kind of demonic figure, which is sort of utterly bizarre. Comes out of old rehabilitated John Birch, history. So there is this odd thing in which actually those guys back then knew what America really was, and it's been corrupted. So it's not just the kind of soundbite problem that attacks history, it's the kind of almost sort of fake pedantry, the sort of fake chronicle aspect, actually, of the way in which history can be abused and deployed. So, gripping television history, which genuinely tells both sides of a story and which actually, puts those things together, is more needed than ever. It always frets about the television of complexity being an entertainment turn-off, and whatever's left of my life is devoted to making that a non-issue. But you have to really, my experience has been, I've been lucky in the BBC has let me do this, and the Jewish series will be no exception. You aim very high in every respect. More important that you aim high, and the audience may come. I mean, we had, for a really complicated film about Obama and the economy and William Jennings Bryan and JP Morgan, 2.5 million people, on pretty late at night. That was pretty damn good. Yes. And so you aim high rather than actually listen to the council and say no one's going to get this. It absolutely depends how you film it. Above all, it depends how you edit it. And of course you have to be aware that it must be understood by your Aunt Ethel too.